Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. Kevin is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel who has studied UFOs for more than 50 years. His military training has provided him with a unique insight into military operations and UFO research. Kevin has investigated many of the most mysterious cases and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries and been interviewed on hundreds of radio and television programs about UFOs. Considered to be one of the leading experts on the Roswell UFO crash, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including Roswell in the 21st Century and Encounter in the Desert, a re-examination of the Socorro UFO landing. Now here's the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And good evening. Welcome to A Different Perspective. I'm Kevin Randle. In just a moment, I will be joined by Robert Cornett, and we're going to be talking about UFOs, Project Blue Book, cattle mutilations, and anything else that springs to mind, I guess. I was going to do a rant here, as I sometimes do. I had had a discussion with a friend who does not live on this continent or in this hemisphere, and was going to talk about some of the things we had talked about. But it turned out to be way too political, and that's the last thing I want to do here is get political, because that would be, I think, the death knell of the program. So there will be no rant. Instead, I'll just introduce Robert Cornett. Bob Cornett was born in a small town in Iowa that no one has heard of, and he tries to keep it that way. Growing up, he developed an appreciation for hunting and fishing. After graduation from high school, I think he was in a class of 8 people. He attended the University of Iowa, where he was privileged to work with the renowned astrophysicist James Van Allen. And I'm thinking, I didn't believe Bob when he told me this. We were going to the University of Iowa, and he was talking about how he was pals with Van Allen, and I didn't really believe it. It just sounded like one of those things, he'd seen it in a class or something. So we're in the physics building. We get on an elevator, and it goes up a floor or two, and I don't know why we're in the physics building, what we were doing there. I had classes in there periodically. And the door opens and Van Allen gets on, and he looks down and he says, "Hi, Bob." Bob says, "Hi, Van." And I'm thinking, yeah, he knows Van Allen. So I just thought I'd throw that in as, I guess, a little bit of interest. Bob has enjoyed many diverse careers. He has been a private investigator, a fire medic, an outdoors writer, a junior college instructor in both creative writing and EMS, and a Marine, no longer on active duty. Bob now makes his home in New Mexico, where he enjoys shooting, ham radio, and retirement when his 3 dogs and his cat will let him. Bob Cornett, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Thank you, Kevin. It's always good to talk to an old friend and an old writing partner. And I think we had 18 in my graduating class.
Okay, I knew it was a small number. And it had an 8 in it, so I was partially correct. And I guess is a way of introduction also. Yeah, we've known each other for quite a long time. We met in ROTC, I believe, and had an interest in UFOs and that sort of thing. And that kind of made me wonder, when did you develop your interest in UFOs?
I don't know for sure. Sometime when I was a teenager, I read some books on the subject, most notably the one by Don Kehoe, and that kind of sparked my interest. And then did some research for magazine articles. And as time went on, linked up with you, we did a lot of investigations together. And I think you became more of a believer and I became less of one. But, the nice thing is we can share an opinion without getting vicious about it.
Well, I think my opinion vacillates from day to day and minute to minute practically. But we had I guess hooked up in ROTC, and the one thing I remember is I used to write for what I called my Saga scholarship, which Saga magazine was a men's magazine, not like Playboy or Penthouse, but articles geared to a male audience, and they would do periodically UFO stories. And I would do a story for them once a semester, which would basically pay my tuition. So I always say I went to college on a Saga scholarship. But I would call an editor there, and periodically he would call me back, but sometimes he wouldn't, and with questions. And a circular had appeared in the ROTC department saying that the Project Blue Book files now were open for public scrutiny if you could get the Maxwell Air Force Base, the Air Force Archives. And so I called the editor, and he didn't call me back, but within 5 minutes, his boss called me back with all kinds of questions to ask. And I said to him, well, I take it I have an assignment. And he said, oh, yes. So you and I went to Maxwell Air Force Base, and we may have been the first 2 civilians to get into the archives at Maxwell Air Force Base.
Yeah, I believe that to be the case. Subsequent viewing of some of the Blue Book files have led me to believe that they were highly redacted after you and I had a look at them. But we had quite an adventure doing that. We weren't getting anywhere very fast with the base librarian until Mr. Smith showed up from Washington. Do you remember him?
Oh, absolutely. We were standing there at this desk and we're asking questions, and they're kind of hemming and hawing around and not really answering us. And this guy shows up, and he's Mr. Smith from Washington, and shows them some credential and says to the librarians, give these guys anything they want. And from that point, we had no problems.
Yeah, they, as I recall, they gave us our private room to read in and take photographs of the documents that had not quite been, I suppose they'd been declassified, but they certainly hadn't been redacted yet. And then we would go back to the hotel at night and develop the negatives in a makeshift dark room we'd set up in the bathroom. And we learned a lot about taking pictures and developing them in bathrooms from that.
Well, I should also point out the reason we were taking photographs is we had been warned before we got down there, and I don't know who warned us, that we would not have access to good Xerox facilities. So we were prepared to copy the stuff as best we could using photographs. So we went down with a lot of black and white film. and photographed an awful lot of documents that way. But I think the point is they really didn't help. The librarians really didn't help us out at first. And they said, well, what cases do you want to see? And the first thing that came to my mind was the Kinross case, the F-94 that disappeared over Lake Superior in 1953. And they brought the folder to us, and it was like 2 pages, and it was a galley proof from a book explaining what had really happened. And I don't remember who it was. One of the officers in the ROTC detachment had been assigned at Kinross at the time this took place, and he told me later on, and I probably should say the Kinross case was a jet fighter was launched to identify some kind of craft or unidentified object over the Lake Superior by radar. And the 2 blips were seen to merge on this radar screen, but they never separated, and the jet disappeared. And he told me there were 2 schools of thought at Kinross Air Force Base at the time. One is it had been taken by the UFO, and the other was it had crashed into Lake Superior. But it's never been found. And I thought it was interesting that a guy who was there told me that and said that there were a lot of other sightings around there at the time. But the point really is, so the Kinross file was like 2 pages. But then they told us there was an index. And we asked for the index. And that was when we went through the whole files, and we wrote down all the unidentifieds, all the photographic cases and physical evidence cases, because all the names were still in it. And and when they released the files to the National Archives, all the names had been taken out. And that was one of the heaviest parts of the redaction that had taken place.
Yeah, I'd almost had forgotten about the Kinross case, but there was a huge number of files that we photographed because we assumed that that information would eventually be lost to researchers, and in fact it was.
There are some gaps in the Project Blue Book files, that's for certain. But I think most of the stuff, I think once it was microfilmed, and we can thank Jack Webb for that, and sent to the National Archives, and made available to many other researchers. But I thought our index of the unidentifieds with the names in it was unique, but it turned out Don Berliner from NICAP had done the same thing when the files first arrived at the National Archives. The names hadn't been redacted, and so he had gone through and done basically the same thing we had done, which was copy down all the names of the people who were involved. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have to take a break here. I see we have a commercial sign. So we will be back talking to Bob Cornett. I'm going to get a little more into Project Blue Book, maybe find out some of his favorite cases as opposed to what mine are. And we'll talk about cattle mutilations at some point, too, because we had some investigations in that, which were quite interesting. And we went to Minnesota heavily armed because of that and some of the stories we had heard. The website is kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Got Blue Buck on the brain. And there'll be more information up there and links to other sites that may be helpful. So I'll be back right after this with Robert Cornett talking about Blue Book and other assorted things. So stick around.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shamans worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Path Home Shamanic Art School proudly presents the Gathering of Shaman 2019 Fall Retreat, Manifestation Samhain. Join me, certified shamanic instructor Gwilda Wiyaka, in the magnificent Colorado Mountains this November 2nd and 3rd for a life-changing event. Participate in unique teachings and ceremonies that'll put the power and magic of shamanic manifestation into your hands. Sit in circle with like-minded individuals, sharing group energy and the power it generates. Classes will be held in a facility next to the beautiful, majestic Arkansas River, further empowering the experience. Space is limited, so reserve your spot today. For more information, visit findyourpathhome.com or email touchin@findyourpathhome.com.
I am joined by Robert Cornett. We're talking about our trip to Maxwell Air Force Base, actually, where we were looking at the Project Blue Book files, where they had been sent by the Air Force after they closed down Project Blue Book and opened for public scrutiny. And as I said earlier, I think we were the first two civilians to actually get in there and look for it because they had been at Maxwell Air Force Base. And the Air Force didn't really announce that publicly that the files were open, but it sent it out in a circular to the various Air Force units. And since we were an Air Force ROTC, we'd seen the circular, and they called our attention to it because they knew we had an interest in UFOs. So we're there in Maxwell Air Force Base looking at the files. Was there a particular case that really excited you as we were looking through that all that material?
Well, not so much a particular case from the material, but you mentioned some of my favorite cases of interest. I think Jesse Montel on the P-51 case.
You mean Thomas Mantell? Thomas Mantell.
Yes, I'm sorry. And of course the so-called crash that occurred here in New Mexico in the early 40s at the only nuclear bomb capable base in the world.
Well, there's really nothing about the Roswell case in the Blue Book files other than a single paragraph in.
It was very short, and I was kind of disappointed with that. I think one of the things I enjoyed most, though, was that one afternoon we had a little extra time, and we went down to a sporting goods store to buy an anti-tank rifle.
And?
Well, fortunately, we couldn't figure out how to haul it home behind your car. So as a result, your wife is still speaking to you, and my second wife talks to me.
Well, we should point out what we found was an anti-aircraft gun that was big enough to be towed behind vehicles. So I think they wanted $1,000 for it, which would be kind of interesting. When we were there, we were looking through the administrative files as well. A lot of administrative documents there. And I know that we found a number of them that suggested the Air Force, various components of the government actually had tried to end Project Blue Book, had tried to move it from the intelligence section to the public affairs section and all that kind of thing. There's something there that really struck out in your mind as well?
Not so much on that sort of thing. Of course, the other stories from the period were like the Bonnie and Betty Hill stuff and the Pascagoula, Mississippi cases. And I do distinctly remember, though, the joint military and civilian observation of the moon. And I have often wondered how both the military and trained civilian pilots could mistake the moon for a UFO.
Yeah, I remember we were laughing about that one when we came across it. Although I have to say, I was investigating a case in Wisconsin, and a guy had called in and said that there was one flying over his house right there. I happened to be in the police station at the time because we were talking about UFOs, and they had some sightings. And he wanted someone to come out, and they said to me, "You want to go?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course I'll go." And we got out there and went to his backyard, and he was looking at the moon. There were low-hanging broken clouds, and the wind was blowing them, so it looked like it was moving, but by gosh, he was looking at the moon. But that was a single witness as opposed to a military group with civilian cohorts there. But other things that might have interested you in the Project Blue Book files when we were sitting there?
Well, there were, I don't remember if it was from the Blue Book files or if this one came out of the Condon Commission report that we also read later on. And that was with the cattle mutilations. And we got our hat tipped to that one by a federal agent whose initials I will say was LF. I hesitate to use his name over the air. But he told us that some of these guys were serious wackos and heavily armed. So we went heavily armed as well.
Well, before we get deeply into the cattle mutilations, let's stay with Blue Book just a little bit longer.
Okay.
Because I think that we had a unique perspective, having been there before things were redacted. And I know we were looking for specific cases as well. We had a list of cases from Saga Magazine, as a matter of fact, that we had to look at. But when we wrote the article, which appeared, in 73, 74, when we wrote our article about it, we dealt quite a bit with the administrative files showing that after around 1953 in the Robertson panel, that was the CIA-sponsored review of the Washington National sightings from 1952, but after that point, there wasn't much of an investigation going on. It was more, what can we do to get rid of this thing? It's kind of bugging us. You remember much about that?
I don't remember a great deal about it, Kevin. I just, I do remember that there was definitely a push to bury Blue Book, and after that point, and to just not have to deal with it anymore. And I think that led us to the Condon Committee report, which was pretty much clearly an effort to get rid of Blue Book.
Well, we know that that's a fact because we've got the letter from Robert Hippler, who was a Air Force Lieutenant Colonel at the time, and he'd written to the Condon Committee and said, "Here's what we want you to find. Say the Air Force has done a good job investigating the stuff. There is no threat to national security, and the Air Force should get rid of the project because if we don't, we're going to spend another $22 million investigating it." And the Condon Committee, after they completed their investigation, said basically the same thing. So clearly the Condon Committee was a put-up job based on, I guess, years of documentation that are in the Blue Book files suggesting that they wanted to get rid of the investigation.
Yeah, and of course there was a well-known astronomer from Illinois at the time who vacillated a lot between there being a nuts and bolts explanation for the UFO sighting and there not being a nuts and bolts explanation. And I think I would rather not mention him by name. He's passed on now, but his family is still around.
Well, I think his family is pretty supportive of his UFO work and that sort of thing. But we've had any number of scientists who were hired at various points by the Air Force to help them resolve the UFO problem. And that's kind of what they saw it as a problem, as opposed to something that needed to be investigated with an open mind. And the Condon Committee, I've mentioned this several times, my favorite citing from the Condon Committee that they investigated, they said that the explanation was a natural phenomenon so rare it had never been seen before or since. And I think that was a pretty ridiculous explanation, but it also suggests in itself that there is something of scientific value to be learned by studying UFOs, even if we don't get to the extraterrestrial.
Yeah, that would certainly be true. I mean, anything that rare would be worth studying, but as far as specifics, I don't recall any that stood out more so than others. There were several good ones. And I also don't want to say anything that might put the damper on a book you're in the process of writing.
Well, we're going to have to take another break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about cattle mutilations, because that was kind of an interesting investigation and kind of a fun thing that we had done going up to Minnesota. Jim Lorenzen of APRO had called me and asked if we could go up and take a look at it, and we said yes. And I think the cattle mutilation thing is, I was going to say pretty well died out, but that would be a bad pun. we will look at that later and what we had done there. So I will be back in just a moment with Robert Cornett. We'll be talking about UFOs. We talked about Project Blue Book. We'll talk about cattle mutilations and take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Please notice I got the title right that time. And stick around.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
I am joined by Robert Charles Cornett, sometimes known as RC Squared. We've been talking about Project Blue Book and UFOs, and I think we'll move on to cattle mutilations. I was sitting around my apartment one day, minding my own business, when Jim Lorenzen from APRO called, and it was mid-1970s, I guess, when cattle mutilations were all the rage, and they were even getting reports of it on the national news. You know, if a cow had been killed and mutilated, it was now national news. And Lorenzen wanted to know if we could go, or I could go, Bob and I could go, to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, to talk to a fellow there who knew something about the cattle mutilations. But what we've been getting was some other information suggesting that there may have been satanic cultists involved, and there were other things going on, and some of these people were heavily armed. So we decided to go heavily armed as well, which we probably shouldn't admit on the air. I think we had 2 pump shotguns and 4 pistols, just in case. So we went up to Minneapolis, and we met the reporter that Jim Lorenzen had told us about. You remember that guy there, Bob?
Yeah. You're talking about the radio reporter, correct?
Yeah, Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
That was his air name.
Not the real Michael Douglas, the phony.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember him. Mike was a very personable kind of guy. I also found the sheriff of the county to be quite personable because when you brought up the issue of us being armed, I wanted to club you over the head because we were out of state then, and there was no widespread concealed carry statute between the states at that time. But the sheriff looked at us, smiled, and said, "You keep them where other people can't see them, and I won't see them either." And that was good enough for me.
Yes, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that, but I was trying to be honest with the sheriff because he was, in fact, the sheriff. One thing that I found interesting is Michael Douglas, and that's not his real name, had investigated a number of the mutilations, and he told us his findings about those. Not suggesting alien visitation, though. You remember what all he was talking about there?
Yeah, there was the group that was into the satanic cult thing. There was a group that was just kind of wackos. There was a lot of predator damage that accounted for a lot of it. And among the wackos, there were those who would lay down sheets of plywood to approach the animal's body without leaving footprints.
Well, I think what was interesting, what struck me as interesting, is there was one of the farmers, one of the ranchers, had said that there had been reports of landing gear indentations on a farm lake or farm pond. And Douglas said that he went out and talked to the farmer, and the farmer said, I made those. I was chopping through the ice to get water for the animals. Mm-hmm. So we were finding terrestrial. The point is, we were finding terrestrial explanations. We weren't just taking the words of the people. But Michael Douglas, not his real name, would had done all this work, and he would point us to the people to talk to and help us out with that sort of thing. So he was a very good source to have there while we were doing the investigation. But I think the interesting thing is, while we were there, I don't think we found one single case that suggested anything that was extraterrestrial.
Yeah, I certainly didn't see anything that would lead me to believe that an extraterrestrial explanation was called for in that case.
I had met a group of hunters here in Iowa, and I'm not sure exactly how I got in touch with them, but they had been out in the woods, and they'd come across a cow that had just recently died, and they were responsible for the mutilations to it, and they just got a real kick out of all the people who were getting all excited about this animal that had been mutilated. I also ran into a veterinarian in Wisconsin, and I always remembered his name because his name was Jefferson Davis, and I thought, geez, a vet in Wisconsin named Jefferson Davis. And he told me that he'd gone out on one of these investigations. The farmer's cow had died and had, I guess, the ears sawed off in some kind of fashion and a couple of other mutilations, and he wasn't real impressed with that because he knew the history of the animal had been very sickly from its birth, and it died of natural causes, and the farmer had committed the mutilations in an attempt to recover insurance money. Don't know why I couldn't think of the word insurance money. But if it died under natural causes, then he got no kind of compensation. So he had committed the mutilations himself. And I wondered how many other farmers might have done something similar. Did you ever run anything like that? When I know we didn't do all our investigations together. Did you ever run anything like that yourself?
A number of cases that I can think of where it's like, the ears, the lips, that sort of thing. Things that would be as likely put down as predator damage. And in some cases, there was pretty good evidence that the farmer himself had done it for the insurance reasons, as you suggest. But I can't say there was a lot of them, just a few.
Well, the other thing was, a number of years ago, I was talking about cattle mutilations to somebody who really believed that this was happening. And he said to me, how do you explain the lack of copper in the blood? We were doing necropsies of the animals, and they were taking blood samples and all of that sort of thing, and there was a lack of copper in the blood. Well, I'd never heard anything like that. And so I looked it up online, which is why the internet is so important today, because I could type in copper deficiency in cattle and find all kinds of scientific papers that explains copper deficiency in blood, in cattle blood. And, that kind of strikes me as weird as well, that we could find, people are studying that in depth. But there was all kinds of natural causes that explains the discrepancy. And the one I remembered, if the animal had just given birth, then there would be a copper deficiency. And there were areas where the pasture land didn't give them the proper copper for their bloods, and they had to give it to them artificially. So we could explain the lack of copper by the natural elements. So the lack of copper in an animal that had been found dead and mutilated just wasn't any kind of suggestion of something nefarious or something extraterrestrial going on, but something very natural.
Yeah, and back in those days, we probably would have been inclined to have just written it down to the Vulcan blood system, you know. But like you said, it is interesting that with the internet now, and you can find all this stuff. I was wondering how you felt about the work we did with Blue Book, how things might have been different if we'd had the internet, if we'd had digital cameras, if we'd had precise laser range finding, like we have so many things that we have today that we didn't have when you and I were out running around in the 70s.
Well, if we had digital cameras, we certainly would have photographed more of the Project Blue Book files, not realizing we'd soon have them available on the internet. I've got a complete set of the microfilms, and I've got a complete set of the Blue Book files that's digitized, which cracks me up because I have them on a thumb drive. I have the entire Project Blue Book files on a thumb drive that I can carry in my pocket. I mean, and if you were doing UFO investigations, think what kind of a research tool that would have been, because you could search for light cases and you could search for all kinds of information that we couldn't get today. But I think that if and I've said this before, that had the Air Force not been wanting to get rid of the Project Blue Book files and Project Blue Book investigations, and had not NICAP been so interested in getting congressional investigations, and they were always at loggerheads about that sort of thing, that neither side was doing good investigations. NICAP was looking for the information to force congressional investigations, and the Air Force was trying to explain everything, regardless of how ridiculous it was, in some fashion. And the best example of this, and I've said this before on the program, is the Levelland case, where the Air Force accused NICAP of lying because Kehoe had said there were 9 witnesses to the Levelland landings and that sort of thing. And the Air Force said there were only 3, but going through the Project Blue Book files, I could find references to 13. And that was just in the Blue Book files. I found other information later on. We're going to have to take our break here for some reason. I don't know. As I say, it's kevinrandle.blogspot.com for additional information. I forgot to mention Roswell in the 21st century. If you want I think the best information about Roswell, Encounter in the Desert, about the Socorro UFO landing. I will be back right after this with Robert Cornett. We will be talking about UFOs, cattle mutilations, and anything else that comes to mind, so stick around.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, The 70-Year Cover-Up Exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hides' life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.
I am with Bob Cornett. We're talking UFOs. We were talking cattle mutilations, and we got off on a couple of tangents there. One thing I wanted to talk about, back in the 1970s, I think there were like 6 magazines that dealt with UFOs. There was Argos's UFOs, Saga's UFO Report, True Flying Saucers and UFOs or whatever, Official UFO. Bob and I were writing for all of those magazines at one time. And we would make a pretty good living doing it. While we were doing that, Bob, was there, I know we didn't always do the same investigations and we didn't always do the same articles, but was there an article that you'd done at the time that kind of fascinated you and suggested maybe an extraterrestrial explanation as opposed to something more terrestrially based?
Well, not so much during that time, Kevin, although I recently got some data presented to me by a couple of farmers living near where I am now that saw large silently moving objects in the night sky, etc., and in the process discovered a town called Meadow Lake. And the closest thing I can think of to is Eureka, which was a short-lived television show. This is a strange town that anybody interested in investigating ought to check out at least once. It apparently comes complete with its own missile silos, although we have no record of them having ever been installed there.
What you mean, the missiles were installed, or the silos weren't built?
No, the silos were built. Whether or not they ever contained missiles, I don't know.
That kind of strikes me as kind of an interesting.
Still there.
Kind of an interesting strategy. Build a lot of missile silos, but you don't have to equip them, and then our competitors in the world don't know what they need to hit.
Exactly.
Well, I know that. I remember the one editor, Bernard O'Connor at Official UFO, he worked up quite a relationship with.
Yeah.
And that he'd sent you a check for an article you'd written, and he put in an extra $1 on it for beer.
Yes, that's true. I'd forgotten about that, but he did in fact do that. So,
well, since you escaped Iowa and moved to an undisclosed location,
yes.
I was wondering, have you kind of kept up your UFO investigation? I mean, we haven't talked about this in a long time, so I just wondered if you've kept up the investigations and found some interesting stuff.
I really haven't. I've been more interested in writing some fiction I've been working on, as well as sort of a tabletop book on tour of the great bars of the Southwest. So been doing that sort of thing. But every once in a while, I just have a case falls into my lap, and I say, well, okay, I'll go out and take a look. So.
But do they lead you to the extraterrestrial? You said you were pretty skeptical about this.
I have yet to see any little green men from Alpha Centauri or any little gray men from anywhere else.
I'm surprised you said little green men from Alpha Centauri as opposed to Tau Ceti. Yeah, that's a private joke, people. Bob and I wrote a science fiction novel we called Seeds of Doubt, and the publishers, for some reason, changed the name to Seeds of War. But it was set on Tau Ceti. And we had quite a bit of fun writing that book.
Yeah, but they weren't little and they weren't green.
Yeah, I know, but it was Tau Ceti as opposed to Alpha Centauri. So
this is true.
And I should point out, Bob and I had done a number of books together. We did a series called Vietnam Ground Zero, which I think is in fact being republished, becoming available again through a British publisher. We've done a number of science fiction books. We did Remember the Alamo, which was a time travel book in which the characters went back in time to win the Battle of the Alamo for the Texans and that sort of thing. So, Bob and I have had a long association of writing both UFOs, investigating UFOs, and writing about science fiction. I think our goal was to write a science fiction novel and have it published, and we were successful in that. We had a number of science fiction novels published. But you haven't really kept up your UFO studies then in the last 204 years.
No, not really. It's, after a while you get kind of tired of, okay, you go out and you check this all out, and it turns out to have either a conventional explanation or a very plausible and reasonable explanation, which might as well be terrestrial. And I haven't seen any spaceships.
But I get the feeling, because I get reports all the time. Somebody saw a light crossing the sky, and I'm thinking, so what? We don't need another report of a light in the sky. Especially, it's like 2:00 in the morning and somebody reports a bright light crossing the sky, and then what do you do with that? Some guy in a private plane turned on his landing light for whatever reason. The wind is blowing the wrong direction, so you don't hear the sound of the engines. There's no way to solve that. Doesn't mean it's a spacecraft. Doesn't mean you just can't get to an answer. So there's always going to be a pile of unidentified cases. regardless of how careful you investigate and how much information you have. Sometimes you're just not going to have an explanation, but that does not lead us to the extraterrestrial.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, gosh, I mean, I would love to have a chance to meet somebody from another world, walk up to them and say, Gort Klaatu Barada Nikto, but.
And they would say, what the hell are you talking about?
It just doesn't happen.
Well, what surprises me is some of these people have really great experiences, and you think it'd be a one-off. I've seen something land close to my house, and it's clearly a saucer-shaped object or whatever. But then they have another one, and another one, and another one. And I'm thinking, I've never seen one good one. And these people are having multiple sightings, and you have to wonder about their ability to discriminate between the natural, the unnatural, and the artificial.
And then there may be the spiritual thrown in on top of that too. So or the supernatural, And it's just I've been disappointed too many times, I guess, and that's lead me to come to the reluctant conclusion that we are alone in the universe. Either we're alone or we're not alone, and either way, it's a mighty sobering thought.
Well, either we're not alone, but they don't have the capability to get here. I think that if we do have alien visitation, it is extremely rare, not the multiple sightings we have on a regular day. And I'm concerned that we don't have good photographic evidence in today's world with everybody running around with a camera in their pocket. So, those are things that we have to look at when we're studying UFOs. Any last thoughts before I let you go?
Just like you said, that everybody's running around with a camera in their pocket. It's a cell phone, for goodness sakes. You don't need a $500 camera like we were using back in those days. You go down and you buy an El Cheapo camera at Family Dollar, and then buy your minutes, and it'll still take pretty decent pictures. So I don't know why, with as many cameras that are running around, as many ham radio operators as we have listening to the air, et cetera, that nobody's coming up with good information unless there is no good information to come up with.
Well, Bob, need to thank you for taking your time to chat with me today. I think we've learned a little bit about cattle mutilations, if nothing else, a little bit about Project Blue Book and that sort of thing. So thank you very much for joining me on A Different Perspective.
Thank you, Kevin. I enjoyed doing the show with you.
Okay. We'll chat with you later, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day. As I say, there will always be information available at my blog, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. I got books out there, and I think they're books that try to tell the truth, not projecting an agenda or a point of view, but here is the information. What conclusions can you draw from that? And I think that if you want to understand the Roswell case, you need to take a look at Roswell in the 21st century. If you want to understand the Socorro case and the latest information, you need to look at Encounter in the Desert. And I've got a new one coming up called The Best of Project Blue Book, which looks at some of the cases from those files. Next week, I'll be joined by John Greenwald at the Black Vault. He's been on before. We'll be talking about some of the things that are going on in the UFO field. So put that on your calendar, and I will be back in 167 hours. So thanks for listening.